Hey everybody, Mrs. Norris here. So today we're going to go on to our next step of organizing our information into sort of an outline and then turning that outline into a paragraph. Again, this is the first DBQ that we've done together, so we're only going to do a paragraph. We're not going to do a full essay. So what you should have in front of you is your paper that you started last time with the tree map of the different documents. So to review what we did last time, we looked at each of the documents and we identified what characteristic of it was the part that guarded against tyranny, right? So federalism, separation of powers, checks and balances, big states versus small states. These are all ideas that are within the Constitution, and they're the parts of the Constitution that help guard the country against a tyrant. So we identified what each part of the Constitution was, and then we identified what it was that we were actually looking at. Were we looking at data? Were we looking at a chart? Were we looking at a graphic? Or were we looking at a quote, an excerpt, something like that? So we identified what it was that we were actually looking at. So knowing this information is going to help us write a better paragraph and help us gather our thoughts better. And we used it to write our claim. And our claim, as you know, is what's going to answer our overarching question. So if our question is, how did the Constitution guard against tyranny? After looking at all of these documents, the claim that we came up with was that the framers wanted to protect the new nation from tyranny, and they did this in 4 ways. Federalism, separation of powers, checks and balances, and finally, by balancing power between big and small states. So now that we've kind of mapped it out, let's talk about what we're going to do with this, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write for you, and you are going to write along with me just a paragraph for one document. So I'm going to be looking at document A, which is why I have the document A slide deck open in front of me. Okay, so I'm going to write about federalism, and then you, in turn, after this, are going to write about either separation of powers, checks and balances, or big states versus small states. It's up to you which one you feel you're the most expert on and can write the most about. Okay, so I'm going to model this for you. What I write, I'd like you to write as well. I understand that I'm not an ELA teacher, and how your ELA teacher expects you to complete something with the clever idea, that's up to that teacher. So what I'm showing you may not go along with what you've learned in ELA. It's just the way that I choose to do my writing. Whatever your ELA teacher wants you to do in their class, please do that. Okay, I don't want to teach you the wrong way. This is just the way that I do it. And if the way that they've taught you how to do it, you understand better, that's totally fine. I just want to see that you've got some kind of an outline, and then you've turned that outline into a paragraph. Okay, so I'm going to show you the outline that I do. So again, I'm going to be working on federalism, document A. So that one you will not be doing. You'll be either doing separation of powers, checks and balances, or big states versus small states. So let's go to our next page. Okay. So sorry, you're going to be looking at me writing, but please pay attention to what I write, because that's what you're going to want to include on your own paper. So what I write on my paper, you write on yours. Okay. So I'm going to start first by writing the question again up at the top. I want to constantly have that in my head as a running commentary of what I'm supposed to be focused on. All right. So how did the Constitution guard against tyranny? Okay, so please write that at the top of your paper. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to make a claim, okay, and we're talking again about federalism, so we want to talk about that in our claim, okay, so I'm going to start by claim, and this is how I am doing my outline. If your teacher shows you a different way, your ELA teacher shows you a different way, then when you are writing your own paper, please make sure that you use that. So what I write, you write as well for this time around. Okay. So my claim is that, federalism helps the Constitution guard against tyranny. Okay, so if you need to pause the video and copy that down, then please do so. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to kind of give a little bit of a definition or an explanation of what federalism means. The reason why I want to do that is because that shows my audience that I know what I'm talking about, right? If I just kind of throw this big word out there, this academic vocabulary, but I don't show that I know what it means, then it doesn't really come across to the audience that I have an understanding of the concept. So I do want to make sure that I use academic language and I explain what that academic language is so that the audience can trust what I have to say. Okay, so I'm looking at James Madison's quote, I'm looking at the graphic, and then I'm looking at my answers to that slide deck. And number 1 and 2, that's what federalism is, right? So federalism is the fact that Madison's got this compound government, or 2 sections of the government, central and state. Okay. And then in number 3, it says they each have their own power, their own ability to do certain things, but also they're keeping each other in check. All right. So I'm going to put that stuff together into a definition of sorts, an explanation of what federalism means. Okay. So I'm going to explain. So when you are writing yours on either separation of powers, checks and balances, or big states versus small states, make sure that you are offering an explanation of what it is so the audience, which will be me, knows that you know what you're talking about. Okay, so let me write an explanation here. Federalism is the idea that some power is given to the states and some power is given to the central or national. Oh, you have a visitor. She's not a very good writer. You gonna look at me, kitty? Okay, so if you need to pause and write that down, then please do so. Kitty, come on, get down, get down, get down. Good girl. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so now that I've made my claim, stated my claim, I gave a little bit of an explanation so that my audience knows I know what I'm talking about. And now I'm going to present my evidence. Now I'm going to talk about the things that I learned from this document. So I'm going to look at the powers that are for the central government, the powers that are for the states, the ones that they share, and then what Madison has to say about it all. Okay, so I'm going to come up with 4 pieces of evidence from this. It's important to have 2 or 3. 4 is the best. Okay, so I'm going to go to my evidence. Number 1. Okay, and for evidence number 1, I'm going to move left to right. Okay, kind of. I'm going to move left, right, middle, and then above. Okay, so central government is in charge of what were they in charge of? Foreign trade, and what else? Declaring war, among other powers. But these are the 2 I'm going to point out. And where did I get this? I got this from Doc A, the graphic. Okay. You need to pause. Let's move on to the next one. Evidence 2. Okay, so I talked about the central. Now I'm going to talk about the states. State governments are in charge of education, and holding elections. Oops. Okay. This also is from Doc A, obviously, and also from the graphic. Okay. 2 down, 2 to go. And again, anytime that you have to pause this tutorial and copy what I write, then please do so. Okay. So now evidence 3. Okay, and this is where we're going to talk about the shared powers. To tax and make laws. Okay. And just for sake of room, I'm going to squeeze this here. Document A, graphic. Okay, so I've covered the graphic, and now the last thing I need to do is cover or discuss or mention the quote. Okay, so that's my last piece of evidence here. Now, these aren't complete sentences. When I write my essay, I'm going to make sure that I am using complete sentences. So evidence 4, Madison, and I'm just going to do this because it's not a complete sentence. Federalism protects the people by, I'm going to look at his quote. In the compound of America, the power surrendered by the people is first divided between two distinct governments, and the portion allotted to each subdivided among distinct and separate. Hence, a double security arises in the rights of the people. The different governments will each control. So I'm going to look at what it says here. For number 3, it says the central and state governments will check each other's power. Also, the branches within each level of government will provide checks within that level. So that's what that means, right? That's what we got for number 3. Governments will each control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. So I'm going to use that quote. And I'm going to take off by protects the people because and I'm going to use quotes, and I'm going to just abbreviate it now, but write it out in the actual paragraph. Governments will each control each other. So I'm just going to use this for now, but in the actual essay, I'm going to write out the entire quote. Governments will control each other. And then itself. So I cannot stress this enough. I'm going to include this entire quote in my final. I'm just putting this here now for sake of space and for writing and for time. Okay, because I know what I'm going to use. I just want to make sure that I have the idea, that I have it pulled out. Okay, and then this is also obviously Doc A. And then I'm going to put Q for quote. Okay, because I don't have the space. If you have the full space to write quote, then please write it. All right. So now we've made our claim, we've given our evidence, and the last thing we need to do is tie it all together with our reasoning. So I feel like, the best reasoning is right there in what we wrote on this document. So number 5 says, under federalism, powers are distributed between the central, the national government, and the states, so neither group could ever gain absolute power or become a tyrant over the nation or its people. So federalism right there is described by distributing the power so that nobody has more power than they need, and therefore there's no way a tyrant can come out. Okay, so I'm going to use number 5 as my reason for this work, because I feel like it's the best connection to my evidence and my claim. Okay, so my reasoning under federalism, powers are distributed between the central, national, and the states Oops. So neither group could ever gain absolute power. Or become stop doing that. Sorry, guys. Okay, I won't do that anymore. I'm going to continue. So go ahead and pause this and finish that sentence, and then I'm going to continue it onto the next page, just so I have the full sentence out. Okay. All right, I'm going to finish the rest of this sentence on slide 3, or on, you continue it if you have space. If you still have space, you're just going to keep with the rest of that sentence. And so where did I end? Could ever gain absolute power or become a tyrant over the nation or its people. Okay. So now I'm going to give you time to write. Pause this video if you need time to write. Okay, with my messy writing, that's going to annoy me that it's so messy, but we're just going to leave it for right now. Okay, so let me just back up. Okay, so once you've finished writing, then start this tutorial back up again. Okay, so this is where we began, right? We broke down each of our documents. We talked about what aspect of the Constitution they discussed and what actually they were, and we came up with our claim. Okay, now I chose one claim that I wrote, and you copied to have an example for your own writing. Okay, so now what I want you to do is take a picture of this, and you're going to rename it. I'll put it on the next slide here. You're going to rename your picture. So take your screenshot and then write your first and last name, rename it your first and last name. Okay. And then underscore, which is on your keyboard, underscore paragraph outline. Okay. So you're going to go ahead and take a picture of this, save it as your first and last name, paragraph outline, and then you can stop this tutorial, and then I'm going to show you in the next one how to put it all together into a paragraph that we are going to write and then type. Okay.